the United States is about to change forever. No, not because of politics, but due to the enactment of a law set to go into effect May 7th, 2025. A law that we've been talking about and trying to get implemented for about 20 years. This impacts both business and personal travel. It will affect every American and green card holder who plans to take a plane departing from a U.S. location. And that's whether you're going internationally or domestically. Your final destination does not matter with this. We'll take a look at what the new rules are and how you can tell if you're compliant. But let's start off with why this is so important. Okay, why this matters. Most of us, including all your business travelers, use our driver's licenses as identification at the airport to get on a plane. If your license does not conform to the rules set out in the REALID legislation, you can't use your license and potentially you will not be able to fly. We'll discuss in a moment what you need to do if your license doesn't conform. But first, let's review what it means to be REALID compliant and more importantly, how to tell if your license is compliant. What the law says. The REALID Act is a law passed by Congress in 2005 to set higher security standards for state-issued driver's licenses and identification cards in response to the 9/11 attack. The law specifically prohibits certain federal agencies from accepting for official purposes licenses and identification cards from states that do not meet these standards. This includes the TSA and the identification you must show at the airport before you board a plane, among other things. The requirement was originally set to take effect in 2008, but it has been delayed several times for various reasons. And I believe, and of course I could be wrong, but I really do believe that this time it will not be delayed again. All 50 states, the District of Columbia, and the 5 territories are REALID compliant and are now issuing REALID compliant driver's licenses and IDs as long as you provide the necessary documentation. So don't just assume your license is compliant. So obviously, how can you tell if your license is compliant? It's really very simple. Pull out your license and take a look at it. And if it has a star in the top right-hand corner, then it's REALID compliant and you're good to go. If it does not, then there's a problem, but not an insurmountable one. There is also something called an enhanced driver's license. You may see this referred to sometimes as EDL. They are issued currently by only 5 states at this time: Michigan, Minnesota, New York, Vermont, and Washington. These can also serve as a secure form of ID for land and sea travel between the United States, Canada, Mexico, Bermuda, and the Caribbean. Okay, just those that smaller conclave of countries, if you will. EDLs are an acceptable alternative to a REALID and are identified by having the image of the American flag and the word enhanced at the top of the card. A word of caution, though. Given all the hoopla that's going on in the political arena, be careful about traveling outside the U.S. without a passport. Now, don't assume that your license is compliant because you went with all that documentation down to the Motor Vehicle Bureau. My friend and her husband went together to the local motor vehicle department. They provided identical identification and her license was issued with the compliant star on it and his wasn't. Why not? The clerk made a mistake. If he had shown up at the airport with the non-compliant license after May 7th, he would not have been able to board the flight. But luckily, he checked and he realized that his license wasn't compliant. And we all should be doing the same thing, okay? Nobody needs a surprise like that. So what if you don't have a compliant license? Well, if you don't have it and it was a mistake, just gather your information, make an appointment, and go down to the Motor Vehicle Bureau. Okay, but assuming that that's not your situation, the Transportation Security Administration has provided a list of other acceptable forms of ID at the security checkpoint. This list is kind of long, and I'm going to read it. So if you don't want to listen to me read the whole list, but you want to, see the rest of it, and you're watching on YouTube, I'll pop in the timestamp as to when the list is finished, and you can skip ahead. But if you don't want to, if you want to listen, obviously, I'd love to have you. So let's go through the list of acceptable forms of identification, alternative acceptable forms of identification. Okay, the state issued enhanced driver's license, a U.S. passport, a U.S. passport card, the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, Trusted Travelers cards, the Global Reentry, Nexus, Sentry, FAST, okay? U.S. Department of Defense, including IDs issued to other dependents, a permanent resident card, a border crossing card, an acceptable photo ID issued by a federally recognized tribal nation, Indian tribe, including the enhanced tribal card, HPSD-12 PIV card, a foreign government issued passport, a Canadian provincial driver's license or Indian and Northern Affairs Canadian card, transportation worker identification credential, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service Employment Authorization card, an I-766, U.S. Merchant Mariner credential, Veteran Health Identification card, okay? But what if you don't have any of these and you still, you find yourself in that situation? In the event that you arrive at the airport without acceptable identification, it could have been stolen, you could have lost it, or whatever, you may still be able to fly. But I want to emphasize here, you may be able, you're not guaranteed, okay? The TSA officer may ask you to complete an identity verification process, which includes collecting information such as your name, your current information, to confirm your identity. If your identity is confirmed, you will be allowed to enter the screening point where you may be subject to additional screening. You will not be allowed to enter security checkpoint if you choose not to provide acceptable identification, you decline to cooperate with identity verification process, or your identity cannot be confirmed. This should be a last resort, an absolute last resort. The TSA recommends that if you're going to try and go this route and you don't have acceptable identification, that you get to the airport at least 3 hours before your flight time. But really, this should be a last resort. Okay, so what does this mean for business travel? For most of us, there'll be little impact. Your travelers will have a real ID compliant driver's license, but some won't have bothered and will remain ignorant of what's going on. So remind your business travelers what's going on before the implementation date. And when I say before the implementation date, I'm not talking about May 5th for May 7th. That would be probably a really good thing to do. This will give them the time they need to get the documentation in order, and if they discover their license isn't compliant, give them time to visit the local motor vehicle office and update their license. I can't say this strongly enough. Don't wait until the last minute, and don't count on being able to deal with the documentation at the security checkpoint at the airport. That's just begging for trouble, and who needs that? This is not the only regulation, by the way, that will have a major impact on both the business community and individuals alike. The federal government, as you may know, is going to phase out rather quickly, I might add, the use of paper checks. So that our listeners don't get caught in a bind over this action, we put together an easy to understand guide on using ACH payments, which you can watch right now using the link that has appeared on your YouTube screen and is in the description. Good luck. And don't forget to check your license to make sure it has a star in the top right-hand corner.